They say a wedding is the happiest day of your life, a culmination of dreams, a promise of forever, a celebration of a love that knows no bounds. For me, it was all of those things until the very moment the gilded facade began to crumble. The carefully constructed illusion of perfection shattered, revealing the shaky, uncertain foundation it was built upon. My name is Sarah, and this is not just a story about my wedding day. It's about the day I broke my husband's heart and the painful, beautiful journey we embarked on to piece it back together. It's the story of how love, against all odds, found a way to not only heal but to grow stronger in the face of betrayal. It's the story of how I, in my flawed humanity, learned the true meaning of honesty, forgiveness, and the enduring power of love. The sun that morning, it wasn't just shining, it was practically screaming with joy. A radiant, golden orb bathing everything in its warm, optimistic light. The venue, a sprawling estate nestled amidst rolling hills, looked like something out of a fairy tale. The meticulously manicured gardens bloomed with vibrant colors, the white linen of the tables seemed to sparkle, and the air hummed with the excited chatter of our families and friends. Each detail had been planned to perfection. From the delicate floral arrangements to the personalized favors, every element was a reflection of the love Ethan and I shared, or so it seemed. Yet, beneath the surface of this idyllic scene, a tempest raged within me. As I sat in the bridal suite, surrounded by my bridesmaids, their laughter and excitement sounded almost alien, like a soundtrack to a movie I was no longer sure I wanted to be a part of. My heart was a caged bird, beating wildly against my ribs, each thump a reminder of the secret that threatened to unravel everything. My dress, a masterpiece of lace and silk, felt heavy, almost suffocating, as I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back was smiling, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I saw a stranger in that reflection, a fraud wrapped in a beautiful gown. How could I be standing here, about to promise a lifetime of love and fidelity, when I was harboring such a grievous transgression? The scent of gardenias filled the room, mingling with the nervous energy of my bridesmaids. They chattered about the perfect day, about how beautiful I looked, and how lucky I was to be marrying Ethan. Each word was like a small dart, puncturing my already fragile composure. "I can't do this," I whispered to myself, my voice barely audible above the din. My best friend, Chloe, heard my words and turned with concern. "Sarah, what's wrong? You seem a million miles away." I forced a smile, a practiced mask I had perfected over the past few weeks. "Nothing, just wedding jitters," I lied, my stomach twisting into a tight knot. The moment came when it was time to go. As I stepped into the hallway, my father's arm extended to escort me. A wave of dizziness washed over me. This was it. There was no turning back now. The walk down the aisle felt surreal. I was floating, disconnected from reality, a puppet being pulled along by the script of a perfect wedding. I saw Ethan standing at the altar, his smile so wide, so genuine that my eyes immediately welled with tears. They weren't tears of joy. They were tears of guilt, of remorse, of a profound, sickening sense of unworthiness. He looked so happy, so trusting, so in love. And the thought of the pain I was about to inflict on him sent a sharp pang through my chest. I watched his eyes light up as he saw me approach and took a breath to calm my inner turmoil. As my father placed my hand in Ethan's, I could feel my hands trembling. I squeezed his hand and tried my best to return his adoring smile. The ceremony unfolded flawlessly. The vows were spoken, the rings exchanged, and the kiss sealed our fate in the eyes of everyone present. But with each word, with each touch, my guilt grew exponentially. My smile became forced, my gaze distant. Inside, the storm was gathering momentum, threatening to break the dam I had so carefully constructed. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I could not keep this secret forever. Ethan deserved better. He deserved the truth. It had happened weeks before, during my bachelorette trip to Miami. The trip was meant to be a last hurrah, a final night of carefree revelry before I embarked on my marital life. The plan was to relax by the pool, soak up the sun, and dance the night away with my closest friends, and while it began as all fun and relaxation, it quickly spiraled into a night I would forever regret. We had started with a nice dinner, a few glasses of wine, and then the clubs. The music was loud, the lights were blinding, and the atmosphere was charged with a reckless energy. As the night wore on, the alcohol flowed freely, and my inhibitions began to melt away. I danced, I laughed, and for a brief moment, I forgot about the wedding, about Ethan, about everything. I gave in to the moment, and it was there that my world changed forever. It happened at a bar, while I was waiting for Chloe to return from the restroom. A stranger approached, a charming, handsome man with a disarming smile. We talked, I don't even remember about what now. He flirted, I flirted back. It was all light-hearted, playful fun. Until it wasn't. A moment of madness, fueled by too much wine, and a serious lapse of judgment. It was a kiss, a quick, reckless kiss that, in reality, meant nothing, but in my mind had become an unbearable weight. It was a slip, a mistake, a moment of utter weakness. Yet the consequences would be monumental. As soon as it happened, a wave of nausea washed over me. The guilt slammed into me like a physical blow. I pulled back, my head reeling, the effects of the alcohol momentarily fading as reality came crashing in. I saw the confused look on the stranger's face and simply walked away, leaving him standing there alone. I spent the rest of the night in a state of quiet turmoil. The laughter of my friends felt distant, alien. I excused myself early, and when I was finally alone in my room, the tears began. I had betrayed Ethan, and the thought tore at me. I had violated the trust he had placed in me, and the guilt was relentless, a constant companion that followed me back home. I tried to convince myself it was meaningless, an inconsequential moment of weakness. I tried to bury it deep within my subconscious, hoping it would fade away. But the more I tried to forget, the more the guilt gnawed at me. It was a leech, sucking the joy out of everything. As the wedding grew closer, my guilt deepened. Every time Ethan looked at me with those loving, trusting eyes, I felt like a fraud. I was lying to him, deceiving him, and the weight of that deceit threatened to crush me. I made a promise to myself. I would tell him the truth, but my fear made the task seem impossible. The closer we got to the wedding day, the more I found myself backing away from the brink. The prospect of hurting him was like a physical pain. I convinced myself, at every turn, that this was not the right time, not the right place. Yet I knew, deep down, that there was no right time for this. The reception had been a blur of laughter, dancing, and well-wishes. Everyone had toasted to our love, and I had forced a smile and raised my glass. All the while the guilt was like a lead weight in my stomach. As the night drew to a close, I felt a mixture of relief and dread. The guests had finally left, and I could finally escape from the public display of happiness. Now, there was nothing left to do but deal with the problem I was ignoring. Ethan and I retreated to our honeymoon suite. The room was luxurious, opulent, a perfect setting for a romantic escape. But all I could feel was the heavy silence and my pounding heart. He turned to me, his eyes sparkling with happiness, completely oblivious to the turmoil inside me. He took me in his arms and spun me around. "You are absolutely stunning, Mrs. Miller," he whispered in my ear. We stepped out onto the balcony, overlooking the twinkling city lights. The cool night air felt like a welcome balm against the feverish heat of my anxiety. Ethan put his arms around my waist and rested his head on my shoulder. I felt the need to break, but I didn't know how to start this conversation. "It's beautiful here, isn't it?" Ethan asked. I nodded, unable to speak. The weight of my secret was crushing me, and I knew that I had to release it, or else it would suffocate me. I had to tell Ethan. This couldn't wait any longer. This was the moment I had dreaded, the moment of truth. I took a deep breath. "Ethan," I began, my voice trembling, "I need to tell you something." He turned to face me, his smile fading as he picked up on the tension in my voice. Concern replaced the happiness on his face. "What is it, Sarah? Are you okay?" I wasn't okay, not even close. Tears streamed down my cheeks, blurring my vision. I didn't want to hurt him, but I knew that I had to. I had to be honest, even though it was going to be the hardest thing I had ever done. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I let everything spill out, the words tumbling out in a torrent of pain and remorse. I told him about the bachelorette trip, the bar, the stranger, the kiss. Each word was like a blow, not only to him, but to myself. I confessed my guilt, my shame, and how much I hated myself for betraying his trust. I didn't try to justify myself. I didn't try to excuse my behavior. I didn't even expect him to forgive me. I simply laid it all out, raw and vulnerable. As I finished speaking, the silence was deafening. The city lights seemed to dim. The cool night air suddenly felt heavy. Ethan stared at me, his expression unreadable. He didn't interrupt. He didn't yell. He didn't even cry. He just looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain, confusion, and something else that I couldn't quite decipher. The silence stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity. I waited, my heart pounding, for his reaction. Anger? Disappointment? Hatred? Any of those reactions would have been understandable, even deserved. But what followed was far more unsettling, an almost eerie quiet. I felt like I was holding my breath, afraid to move, afraid to speak. He finally exhaled, a long, slow sigh that seemed to carry all the pain and confusion he was feeling. He stepped away from the balcony and began to pace, running his hands through his hair. His movements were jerky, agitated, like a caged animal. Each step echoed in the silence. "Sarah," he said, his voice soft, almost a whisper. "I don't even know what to say." He turned to face me, his eyes searching mine. I won't lie and say this doesn't hurt. It hurts more than I can even express. His voice cracked, and I saw a flicker of pain in his eyes. "I know," I whispered, my voice thick with tears. "And I am so sorry. But," he continued, his voice stronger now, "I also know that everyone makes mistakes. It's part of being human. What matters is how we move forward." His words hit me like a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of the abyss. It was not the reaction I had expected, not even remotely close. I was prepared for anger, for condemnation, for him to walk away. But what I got instead was this strange, almost unbelievable compassion. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I've done something truly awful." I was drowning in guilt, and his calm, compassionate response only deepened my shame. He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to touch my cheek, his fingers brushing away my tears. "Maybe not," he replied, his voice gentle but firm. "But love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing each other, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." He wrapped his arms around me, holding me close. I buried my face in his chest, sobbing uncontrollably. He didn't say anything, he didn't try to stop my tears. He simply held me, and in that moment, I felt a flicker of hope, a tiny spark amidst the darkness. The next few days were a blur of tears, painful conversations, and uncomfortable silences. We didn't leave the hotel room, barely ate, barely slept. Instead, we talked, we argued, we cried. We dissected every detail of that night, trying to understand what had happened and why. Ethan asked questions, and I answered them with complete honesty, no matter how difficult it was. I couldn't hide anything from him, even the most humiliating parts. It was necessary, even though it ripped me open, exposing my deepest flaws and insecurities. It was excruciating, reliving that night over and over again. Every time I spoke of it, I could see the pain on Ethan's face. I had broken his heart, I had shattered his trust, and seeing the hurt I had caused him was worse than any punishment I could have imagined. But we persisted, determined to face this head-on, together. We were no longer on the path to a perfect, storybook marriage. Our reality was messy, painful, and far more complex than either of us had imagined. We knew we needed help. We reached out to a marriage counselor, a kind, insightful woman who guided us through the complex maze of emotions that followed my confession. She gave us tools to communicate better, to understand each other's needs and fears. She helped us navigate the minefield of anger, resentment, and doubt. We learned to speak our truth without fear of judgment, to listen with empathy and compassion, and to work together as a team rather than as adversaries. Therapy wasn't easy. Some sessions left us feeling drained and defeated, as though our wounds were only deepening. There were times when I felt as if our relationship was beyond repair, that I had damaged us beyond recognition. But there were also moments of unexpected connection, of shared vulnerability, that gave me hope for our future. Forgiveness didn't come overnight. It was a slow, gradual process. There were days when Ethan looked at me with a mix of hurt and anger, days when he would withdraw and become distant. My heart would sink every time I saw that distance, and I'd remind myself, again and again, that I had caused this. I had brought this pain on him. There were also times when I doubted whether he could ever truly forgive me. The trust had been broken, and rebuilding that trust was a daunting task. There were moments where I just wanted to leave and release him from the misery I had caused. But Ethan never wavered in his love. He never let me believe that he wasn't going to forgive me. But Ethan's love, surprisingly, never wavered. He chose to forgive me, not because it was easy, but because he believed in the strength of our bond. He had seen me at my worst, my most vulnerable, and he still chose to be with me. He had seen the true me, with all my flaws, and he had not run away. It wasn't just him forgiving me, I too had to forgive myself. I had to let go of the guilt and shame that had been eating away at me. I had to forgive myself for being human, for making mistakes. I had to learn from that dark night, and vow to never let myself put our relationship through that again. I focused on becoming a better partner, someone worthy of the second chance he had given me. I was more open and honest than I had ever been. I learned to communicate my needs and emotions without fear. I listened to Ethan with a deeper level of empathy, trying to understand his perspective, even when it was difficult. I made our relationship my priority. A year later, as we celebrated our first anniversary, I looked at Ethan with a heart full of gratitude. He wasn't just my husband. He was my rock, my confidant, and my best friend. The journey we had been through wasn't one I would wish on anyone, but it had brought us closer than ever. Our love had been tested, and it had endured. The pain of that time hadn't disappeared entirely, but we carried it now as a reminder of the fragility of love and how much work went into building it and keeping it strong. We had learned to trust each other more deeply, to communicate more effectively, and to love each other with a greater sense of vulnerability. "I'm so incredibly proud of us," Ethan said as we raised a glass to our future. "We've proven that love isn't just about the good times. It's about weathering the storms together. We've built something truly special, Sarah." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I squeezed his back. "I'm so grateful for you, for your forgiveness, for your strength, for your love." My eyes began to water. This time they were tears of happiness, of love, of profound gratitude. My confession could have ended our marriage before it truly began, but instead, it became the foundation for a deeper, more meaningful connection. Honesty, even when it's painful, is the cornerstone of a true and lasting love. I've learned that mistakes don't define us. How we choose to move forward does. It's not about being perfect, it's about being real, vulnerable, and committed to working through the hard times together. Ethan and I are stronger now, not because we're perfect, but because we've embraced our imperfections. We've learned to forgive ourselves and each other. We've learned to trust and be vulnerable with one another. We've learned to put each other's needs ahead of our own. Love, after all, is not about never falling. It's about rising together, stronger and more resilient after every fall.